So if you can focus on what is specifically relevant to you and your condition in terms of the top takeaways that you can actually implement in your daily life, because we want this to be something that's useful and makes a significant impact on your well-being. So the first question to get your brains going is, how much stress is good for you? To talk about regulation then, we are looking in the area of stress and relaxation. And I think by the end of this section, you'll understand why I prefer the term regulation to relaxation, which a lot of people would use in this context. So to talk about relaxation, just need to talk a little bit about stress. And stress affects 1 in 5 adults. Chronic stress affects 1 in 5 adults globally. And according to the World Health Organization, it's one of, if not the biggest threat to the health of our current generation. And I personally think that's an understatement, because if you knew how much stress affected you, you'd probably be even more stressed. And also, if you thought you had to be relaxed all the time, that would also be quite stressful. And it turns out not what the body wants or needs. So chronic stress, as you may know, affects a multitude of systems in the body, from the very small micro level to the larger macro level. It affects your immune system, making you more vulnerable to infection. It affects your heart. It's often associated with heart problems. You can have digestive issues, and the digestion produces many of the chemicals, biochemicals, and neurotransmitters necessary for mental health as well. So it can affect mental health, anxiety and depression. It can cause sleep problems. It can cause weight management issues, muscle tension and pain, energy issues, impaired cognition or thinking, such as brain fog, memory, concentration, and hormonal imbalances, potential fertility issues, as well as other hormonal regulation issues. So chronic stress can have a huge impact on our physiological well-being. But I just want to define the terms stress, good stress, bad stress, and dysregulation, which may all be terms that you've heard of in this area. So that obviously is all bad stress, chronic stress. And when we're talking about stress, we're not just talking about, oh, you've had a bad day and you need to go and relax. We're talking about a part of the nervous system, the fight, flight, freeze system, actually becomes dysregulated. It becomes distressed, and it can no longer work out the balance of chemicals you need to stay healthy and happy. So it's either sending out too much of something or too little of something. And that some people call dysregulation. So you may have heard of the term autonomic nervous system dysregulation. But it turns out there's also good stress, sometimes called eustress. And you may have heard of things like intermittent fasting, hot and cold therapies, the deep breathing, Wim Hof method, and the cardio. And there's really good science to show that the physiological system actually likes to be stressed within a certain range. So this part of the nervous system was originally very physiological. It was designed to protect us from getting too tired, too hungry, etc. It was designed to kick in when we were under threat from tigers and so on. These days, we tend to be physically comfortable most of the time. If we're a little bit hot or cold, we turn the heating or the aircon on. You know, we're very rarely hungry. We're very rarely physically stressed. So this part of the nervous system is not being used in the way it was designed to be used. And a good analogy for understanding this is if you imagine if you had a car and you kept it in the garage all the time and you never used the engine, or you just drove it around town at like 20 kilometers an hour, the engine wouldn't be being used to its full potential, its full capacity. And so if you then did run it really fast, it would get a bit of a jolt and it would feel like something was a concern, even though if it was run normally and regularly, it wouldn't be a concern. And people use this understanding in peak performance. So soldiers and top sports people, they've learnt that if you can stretch or stress the physical system while staying calm in your emotional system, then that's the healthiest, most resilient system that we can have. So I'll give you a case example to illustrate what I mean. So there was a chap who had chronic fatigue, and his main symptom was heart palpitations. Now, obviously, he went and got his heart checked out by the public health system, and they said, nothing wrong with you, mate. So then he went and had a second opinion from the private health system, and they said, nothing wrong with you, mate. And they said, his doctor said, go and learn relaxation techniques, go home and avoid stress. So he did what he was told. He went home and learned relaxation techniques, but he found work a little bit stressful. So he started to work less. And he also found some of his hobbies a little bit stressful. So he started to do those less. And then he found exercising stressful. So he started to do that less. So he was doing less and less and less. And he was becoming more and more isolated and more deconditioned. And his heart symptoms continued. In fact, they got a little bit worse. So he ended up coming to me, and we went through the program, which I explained briefly last time. There's 3 components. There's understanding what's happening. There's the lifestyle issues around what supports and doesn't support the condition. And he was self-medicating with certain substances and realized that they were not helping once we'd had a discussion on that. And then we looked at the cognitive behavioral understanding of the conscious and the subconscious mind, understanding how to communicate with one another. So we were doing an exercise where he was learning to increase his range, increase his resilience, rev his engine, as it were, and communicate from the conscious and the subconscious mind. And it was like a guided visualization. So his eyes were closed and he was going through his symptoms, and he suddenly popped his eyes open and he said, oh, it's the petrol. I was like, sorry, what do you mean? He said, oh, I've just realized and remembered whenever I smell petrol and hear the sound of an engine, I have heart palpitations. And before this, I'd said to him, is there any trigger? Is there anything that, no, there's nothing. It was completely subconscious. He did not have conscious access to this information. But in this deeply relaxed state where he understood the symptoms, this memory came to him, and he realized that his subconscious mind, whenever it went, and that was one of his hobbies, was model motorcar racing. Whenever it smelled petrol and heard this noise, he would get these heart palpitations, and then it became a habit. And we didn't have to go into the story of his childhood and why this had all happened. We just had to unhook this neural association and then hook it onto a healthy association so that he knew it wasn't necessary. And literally within 2 weeks, I rang him up. He said the symptoms have gone. And he said the best thing is, even if the symptoms came back, it wouldn't worry me because I know what they are now. They're not a medical issue. They're just a false warning system coming from my subconscious mind. So we've got the three pieces. We've got the understanding, we've got the lifestyle support, and then we've got this cognitive behavioral change. And through that, he was able to increase his resilience. And rather than just focusing on relaxation, he was able to also work on activating the system, but doing so within a controlled manner whilst staying focused and making it out of choice. Many of you will have come across certain breathing techniques for relaxation. So we can either focus on breathing techniques that deactivate and relax this nervous system, or we can focus on breathing techniques that activate it. And in this session, we're just going to focus on breathing techniques that deactivate the nervous system. And some of them may be familiar to you, but I would like you to experience them with the information that we've just covered. And if you just take a moment to focus in on the sensations of the body, and obviously listen to your body. If you have any breathing issues or associations with breathing, then be guided by your inner knowing. But if you enjoy breathing and you enjoy relaxation of the breathing, then I would just invite you to take a few deeper breaths deep down into the belly. And this is either called belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing. And you can lower or close your eyes if you enjoy to. And just as you breathe deep down into the belly, just be aware that the belly will move more than the chest and shoulders. Often we breathe up high in the chest and shoulders, but here we want to breathe deep down into the belly. And if it's comfortable, you breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. And as you breathe out through the mouth, you can make the shape of a straw, like you're blowing the wind out through a straw. And you can breathe out for longer than you breathe in. So up to twice as long. And you can also make a yawning or a sighing noise as you breathe out. And that immediately tells the nervous system all is well. Everything can relax. And you can just notice the effect that has on slowing you down, perhaps softening, making you more present. And then we can go into a technique called box breathing, where you just begin to count the breaths. So you breathe in for the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out for the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. And hopefully you can notice your system just having that time to recover and rebalance. We live such fast-paced lives, and the system just likes to be relaxed, restored, reassured, and supported. Another case illustration of a sound healer came to me who had chronic fatigue and anxiety. And he was, in terms of the 3 aspects of the program for recovery, he was quite well aware in terms of the education piece. He understood his condition. He was also quite well aware in terms of the lifestyle medicine because he had a super healthy lifestyle. But it was the regulation piece that made the most effective difference to him. And he only came to me for a brief 6-week session. And he was able to make his subconscious symptoms conscious through the recognition piece. And then we worked on this regulation resilience area. So we were working with pacing and grading. And with pacing and grading, you may have heard of something called the sorbet safe zone. It's also sometimes called the Goldilocks zone because you don't do too much and you don't do too little. And it's very important with pacing and grading as you're increasing your resilience, that it's done in a way that doesn't make the nervous system nervous. So we worked on resilience. Yeah, he was able to increase his energy levels, his resource and resilience levels through the pacing and grading to a consistent new baseline. And it was because his nervous system was reassured that he was able to rev his engine, as it were, in a way that felt safe and manageable and healthy. So I'm going to ask that question again that I asked at the beginning of the regulation piece, which is, given the information we've just covered, how much stress is good for you? So my answer would be basically as much as you can handle. Because if you think about the sports people and the top soldiers, they've trained their systems to be able to handle a lot more stress than we have. So what they can handle would be good for them, would be bad for other people. And the analogy I really like is of a river. So if we have a river, if you imagine in the middle, we've got the stream of comfort. And if we're always in the comfort stream, it's nice, but we get kind of like a bit stagnant and a bit deconditioned. So on the sides of the river, we've got the stretch zone. And this is your healthy stretch zone. This is the good stress zone. And we want to be going between the comfort zone for rest and the stretch zone to be revving our engine. So this is where we're exercising our physiological system. But if we go the other side of this good stretch zone, the other side is the bad stress zone. And if we've gone too far over the stretch zone into the bad stress zone, that's when we're not learning, we're not helping, we're reinforcing negative messages to the physiological system. So it's really important to know, and it's completely individual, when we are in our personal stretch zone. And that's something we can really focus on working out for ourselves. You know, what takes me into my stretch zone and what takes me into my stress zone. And, you know, trying not to always stay in the comfort zone, because that doesn't actually help us in the long run. Yeah, so it's being wise with stress and not being stress averse, not avoiding it, but not being continually at the point where we're exhausting our system. Okay, let's move on to the third E, which is recreation. And here, the question to get your brains going is, Is brain retraining a quick or slow process? Tori, if you want to read out the answers, that's super helpful.
Slow. Slow and complicated. Yes, I
Oh.
reckon. Slow, quick if you have the right methods. Grace. Definitely
Wow.
slow. Depends on the issues. Some is quick, but it can be a work in progress. Yeah, I'm with you there. Depends on your enthusiasm.
I like that one.
I like that one too.
If your answers change by the end of the section. So this is the fun part, because this is where you get to rewire your brains. So it's do-it-yourself brain surgery. And also I get to share a secret with you, which is that you have a pharmacy. No, you don't need the scissors. You have a pharmacy open 24/7, completely free, most powerful drugs in the world, absolutely no side effects, and it's in your brain. How marvelous is that? So we're going to access that now, and we're going to generate some chemicals, and I'm going to teach you how to do that. Now, in order to teach you how to do that, I'm going to have to teach you an entirely new language. But before you look too worried, there's only 3 words in this language, and Tori might want to put them in the chat for me. So that it's images, sensations, and emotions. And the acronym for images, sensations, and emotions is ICE, I-S-E, so spelt badly. So there's only 3 words to learn in this new language. It's really not that tricky. And we're going to practice that together. Now, essentially, the theory is, and there's a lovely picture you'll see when you do get the slides, which is basically what we put in our brains is what we put out in terms of chemicals. So it's just like with our food diet. If we put good food in our body, we get good response. If we put good things in our brain, we get a good output. So this is like our mental diet. And we're going to cover something called DOSE, which is an acronym for 4 chemicals. You do not need to remember the names of these chemicals. What we put into our brains pours out in the sense of chemicals. And we're going to be looking at images, sensations, and emotions. And we're going to generate a magic pill. And this magic pill is going to be made of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin. Do not need to worry about any of those words because I'm going to explain them as I go through. What I would ask you to do is to free both your hands. So what we're going to do is, this is an ancient Japanese method mixed with modern Western science. And we're going to take one hand and we're going to generate each chemical in each finger. So all you need to do is take your other hand, wrap it around the first finger, and we're going to do D for dopamine. And you just hold your first finger for 30 seconds whilst using this new language. So you're going to be thinking using images, sensations, and emotions of anything that was motivating, because dopamine is the motivating chemical. So any movie that you saw that was heroic, any awards that you've won, anytime you've ever set a decision and stuck to it, anytime you've ever felt or seen anything heroic, and imagine it and sense it and feel the emotions that you felt of all that motivation, inspiration, courage. And then we're going to move down to the next finger, which is oxytocin. And again, we're going to use the language. Oxytocin is our love and bonding chemical, our trust chemical. So imagine, sense, and feel the emotions of any memory or movie or imagination, fantasy you have, of anything that was loving, kind, anything that restored your faith in human nature, random acts of kindness that you did or received. Imagine hugging people or stroking dogs and cats. And then you hold down to the next finger, your serotonin. And this is your pleasure chemical. And you just imagine and sense and feel the emotions of anything pleasurable. And this is PG rated, so keep it clean. I'll be thinking about skinny dipping and eating chocolate and motorbiking and anything that just gets your blood racing in a really good way. It makes you think of happy things and sunshine and dancing and music. And then move down to the next finger, which is E for endorphins. And this is your natural body's painkillers. So again, imagine, sense, and get the emotions of, I know that feeling when you've been gardening all day and then you get in the bath and you get that rush of comfort, or how you know the body heals a bruise without you even knowing about it, or if you have ever done the hot cold therapy and you jump in the cold and you think you're not going to be able to cope, and then you get this rush of warm coming through you. And then you take all of those 4 chemicals and you mix them up in the thumb and you hold the thumb. Because if you think about it, what does the thumb represent to a toddler? A thumb represents safety. And I'm not going to get you to suck your thumb, but we're just going to mix all those chemicals in that thumb. And as they mix in the thumb, we all know that it's easier to carry a pill than a liquid. So we can pour that liquid down into the center of the hand, and we can pulsate that acupressure point in the center of the hand. You can either pulsate it or just hold pressure on it for 30 seconds. And this is important that we use the imagination, sensations, and emotions here, because I would like you to know what color the pill is, what shape it is, how large it is. Apparently, according to research, red ones are more effective than blue ones. Bigger ones are more effective than small ones. And there's something about hexagonal shapes, I can't remember, as well. So you can imagine what it tastes like even as you swallow it. And you can also imagine the well-being effects that it would have on your system if you took it. That rush of all those 4 chemicals going through your system. Now, if you can relax your hands now. If you regularly did that activity, and when I say regularly, I mean maybe daily for 6 weeks, you would wire into your brain that association, and your brain, if you then touched that acupressure point on your hand, would release those chemicals automatically. That's how simply and effectively the system works. The reason for doing this is because this is how our brain naturally learns, and it will learn certain patterns and then make them subconscious. But it may have learned, the pressure point is in, I don't know if you can see my hand because I can't see mine, it's just there. Just sort of at the base of the thumb where it gets a bit soft. And so how the brain naturally learns, and it wires things and it communicates with chemicals, but it has a negativity bias. It has a safety, protection, threat bias. And so it learns these patterns and then it makes them subconscious, and we're not aware of them. We're just on automatic pilot, a bit like when we're driving home and we skip the junction because we're going a familiar way. So what we're doing here is we're actively taking control of the learning process, learning things we want to learn that help the system, support the system, and then it can become subconscious again. Because we can't keep all of it conscious, it's too exhausting for the brain. So that's a very quick introduction to just one technique of brain retraining. Just want to mention these other aspects, which is mindset, because a positive mindset is really important, but a positive mindset is not positive thinking. Positive thinking is me not feeling great and sitting there going, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy. Doesn't work. Might work a little bit, but really not very effective. positive mindset is more like intelligent thinking, I would say. And one example of positive thinking is we can focus, and you might want to write these 3 things down. If we were going to focus on 3 things, we could focus on 3 things that would make us unhappy and unwell, or 3 things that would make us happy and well. And the 3 things are, we can either focus on A, what we can control or what we can't control. Obviously, if we focus on what we can't control, we're in trouble. We can't control the weather. We can control whether we wear a good hat and an umbrella. So if we focus on what we can control, that's positive thinking. It's helpful. The second one is we can focus on either the present moment or the past and the future. Now, focusing on the past, not a lot we can do about that if we have regrets. Worrying about the future, not very helpful. Focusing on the present, we've got choice and control in the present moment. And then the third one is we can either focus on what's going well, or we can focus on what's going badly. And it might seem like a simple and silly choice, but something like that can have a massive effect on our well-being. And there's studies to show that if we can have 3 positive thoughts and feelings for every 1 negative one, we can significantly and radically change the trajectory of our health and well-being. So positive thinking isn't having superficially Pollyanna happy thoughts. It's just intelligent thinking about focusing on what's positively good and investing in our health. And then exercise, I think I've said before, getting specialized help with pacing and grading to be really sure you're working in the sore but safe zone. And then information on diet and sleep is quite readily available now. So that's something you can research yourselves if you like to. And I quite like the acronym MEDS for that. If you focus on your meds and take your dose, then that's going to really boost your well-being. So this is Steve, and he was a warehouse manager, father and grandfather, and he had a motorbike accident leading to a concussion and multiple but relatively minor fractures. And after 6 months, he was told, you're physically fit and off you go back to work. But he still had significant symptoms, chronic pain and fatigue. He had dysregulation of his emotions. So he was having anxiety and anger outbursts. And he had hypersensitivity to light and sound. So he came to me and we worked on the education piece, which immediately made a massive difference to him, just understanding what was going on in his brain. And then we did the lifestyle medicine piece, which was quite straightforward. And then we did the cognitive behavioral piece, where he learned with his conscious mind to communicate with his subconscious mind to reassure the system. And he was making great progress, going back to his activities of daily living, his hobbies, his roles. And then he went back to work on a phased return. And that's when he had a relapse. And it turns out he had his motorbike accident on the way to work, and also that he found work stressful. So I taught him a brain retraining technique, which is, can sound a little controversial, but if you understand it and use it wisely, it's very effective. And it's called the Oh Jolly technique. And basically what you do is when you're feeling challenged or your system's feeling threatened, you respond positively by saying, oh, jolly, an opportunity to use my skills and resources, an opportunity to learn to go to the next level. And so we went through this technique and how to use it wisely, and off he went back to work, and I wasn't sure how it was going to go. And he came back the following week and he was literally beaming. He was like, not only did it work really well because he felt empowered, he was able to focus on what he could control, what was going well. working in the present moment. But he said also his colleagues noticed him doing it and they'd all started doing it. So everyone at work was now doing the oh jolly technique when things went wrong, and responding with a positive, what can I do about this? What can I learn from this? And if you flick to the next slide, this is Steve's recovery in his own words. And he felt he was a better version of himself than before the injury, because he'd learned so much about how his system worked and how to invest in his health and well-being. So in answer to the question, is brain retraining quick or slow? The answer is both. You can change a thought and an emotion almost instantly. So it's from 90 seconds to 90 years, because you can change and reroute something in the moment. You can catch it and decide to do something differently. However, if you want it to reroute in the long term so that it becomes a habit, then it needs continual practice, just like learning any skill, just like practicing any muscle. And I love this quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson: sow a thought and you reap an action, sow an action and you reap a habit, sow a habit and you reap a character, sow a character and you reap a destiny. And it just goes to show that every thought, feeling and behavior we have or do creates a momentum, and we can, it's like turning the Titanic round. We can turn and turn and turn and turn and turn until we're literally going in such a different direction because of this build-up of habits. And obviously, if those habits are supporting our well-being, our trajectory is going to be that much more positive. So what have we learnt? If you were in the first session, you would have learnt from recognition how to move things from the subconscious to the conscious, or the fact that we need to move things from the subconscious to the conscious, because if we don't know about it, we can't do anything about it. And this helps us to be informed by wisdom of what is normal messaging, pain, distress symptoms, and what are learnt messaging, pain, distress symptoms, because from our experience, we can't tell the difference. Our experience is going to be exactly the same pain, fatigue, etc. We don't know from our experience which system it's coming from. So it's really important that we understand the origin and don't just listen to the symptoms themselves. And we need to know how to be able to distinguish between those two symptoms. So then we can update any dodgy data, and we can use mindfulness wisely, because if we don't understand how to use mindfulness, we can make things worse, make the system more sensitive. But if we use it mindfully and wisely, that enables us to work with the symptoms that come up. And so, in my opinion, knowledge is power, because it gives us choice and freedom over our experience, not just being run by our experience. And then today we looked at regulation and looked at the difference between relaxation and regulation, because what we want to do is have a range of resilience and work within that range, so we know we can activate or deactivate the system and not just try and stay in one narrow range all the time. And one of the ways to do this is through pacing and grading and staying in the sore but safe zone. So knowing that we can gently nudge up and up in a way that reassures the system and doesn't trigger that alarm. Because if we trigger the alarm, we get payback pain, post-exercise malaise, and all the rest of it. And then we looked at recreation, which is brain retraining. So it's using the brain's normal learning patterns and moving away from any negativity biases that we've learnt and retraining in a positive direction, which is not positive thinking. It's just intelligent thinking, so that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are supporting a healthy, happy trajectory. And it's just making this process conscious so that we have choice rather than just going along with default habits and behaviors that we've learned along the way. So I showed this last time. This is the 2 resources, 2 books that I recommend for not just for pain management, but just understanding this whole body-mind system and how to operate it in a wise way, and that you're able to make more empowered decisions and that you feel inspired to do as much as possible for your well-being. And also, hopefully, you've achieved your mission, which is to focus on at least one thing that you can take away and implement in your daily lives from now onwards.